Hi and welcome to Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen. Just before I go on, I'd like to emphasise, I know Shavuos is coming up. I'm not planning on doing any new Shavuos videos this year. There are a couple from last year that you're more than welcome to watch and download. Nothing much has changed about Shavuos since last year, so they're still just as relevant. So I'd encourage you to watch those. For this video, I want to talk about the concept of thought in Jewish law, in Jewish philosophy. Particularly, we've been hearing about a lot of anti-Semitism in the media, amongst political parties, but particularly amongst the Labour Party. And we've also been hearing a lot over, oh goodness knows how many years now, about Islamic extremism and Islamic fundamentalism, and how some of the beliefs that they're espousing are impacting on Western civilization. And I wanted to sort of put this out to put Judaism's view on thought, simply because I think there's some boundaries that are being blurred between what people are thinking, what they're saying, and what they're doing. And in Jewish law, those three things are very, very different. I'm hoping that this video or these two videos, I should say, will hope to clear this up. In the first video, I'll be looking at our thought in relation to God, and what thoughts we can and can't have in relation to God. And in the second video, I'll look at thought in relation to other people, and then we'll wrap up talking about coercion, what the role of that is in Jewish law briefly, and then, as I say, just to sort of broadly wrap it up and try and apply it a little bit. My whole interest in thought and thought crime was actually sparked at quite an early age, actually, I should say. One of my favourite novels that I've ever read of all time, George Orwell, 1984, introduced the concept of thought crime. And, you know, since then you read novels by Philip K. Dick and the films, Minority Report, that have been made of his books, where thought is mandated and people are punished for thoughts that they have or don't have. But in Judaism, thought actually plays a very not a very important part. We're not very worried about what people think, and I'm hoping that you'll see that through the course of these two videos. So let's start by talking about our relationship with God. So I said we'd start talking about what's called kavanah. That loosely translates as mindset, or frame of mind, or intention. Okay. There are broadly two types of mitzvahs that we do in relation to our relationship with God. Those are saying mitzvahs and doing mitzvahs. Saying mitzvahs, there's not many of them that we fulfill by saying something. The Shema, the first paragraph, the first blessing of the Amidah, the first bracha of the Amidah, some say, grace after meals, certainly, but probably only the first bracha of that. I'll put up a link to Halachapedia at this video. It's beautiful, fabulous web resource for practical halacha, but obviously if you want some guidance, please do consult with a rabbi on that. But for these, there is minimal intention that one has to have to understand what one's saying, to understand why you're saying it, and to understand who you're saying it to. I have done other videos on how and why on the Shema and the Amidah, which explain the intentions to have there. But saying mitzvahs are very abstract, so it is important, very important, to have kavanah on those, to have the right frame of mind on those. And there are opinions that say that if you don't, then to some extent, again, you need to check the sources that I've given you, but you may have to go back and start again. But in terms of doing mitzvahs, and I'm going to limit myself to the mitzvahs in the Torah throughout these videos. So these are mitzvahs that are specifically mandated with clear sources in the Torah. Kavanah is less important. The 2 or 3 reasons why that is. Normally the fact that you're doing the mitzvah is an action that you wouldn't ordinarily do, so that automatically puts you in a frame of mind. Other opinions say you're saying a bracha before you're doing these actions, like shaking a lulav, eating matzah, listening to the shofar. And so by saying that bracha, part of the reason for the bracha is to put you in the frame of mind. In fact, there are people that and if you look in some siddurim, I think the Art Scroll Siddur has this, there are some paragraphs that you can say sometimes before doing a mitzvah that helps put you in the frame of mind. But for the doing mitzvahs, kavanah is less important. But there's an interesting twist on that. One can have in mind not to undertake the mitzvah. So if one doesn't have kavanah, yes, ordinarily speaking, you do fulfill the mitzvah for doing mitzvahs. But you can have in mind specifically not to be covered by this mitzvah. An example might be you're in the children's service with your kids on Rosh Hashanah, and kid is larking around with a shofar. You don't want that kid to fulfill your mitzvah listening to the shofar because they're doing a very bad job of it. But you're going to later go into shul and hear the shofar properly. So what you say is, look, I'm not going to cover myself for any noise that this kid's making or that I'm going to hear until I go into shul. And that way you've not fulfilled your mitzvah. So an interesting twist on the logic there. That I think some people may have to require a little bit of explanation. Anyway, another explanation for why kavanah is less important is that there are many great mystics that have written about the mystical meditations that they would undertake before going through with doing a mitzvah. The Arizal wrote a book, Shari Kavanis, or Sefer Kavanis, on different meditations one can have on before doing each mitzvah in the Torah. We can aspire to be at these levels, and I would never discourage anyone from growing in their spirituality. But we're going to struggle to get anywhere near the levels that these great mystics achieved. And so the Torah, cuts us some slack and say, well, look, you're not going to get to that level, so at least try your best, and whatever you can achieve, you achieve. So when we say a mitzvah doesn't need kavanah and you're okay if you haven't got kavanah, what one could argue is the kavanah that it's talking about is the kavanah of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria and all these great mystics, and if we do what we normally do and just have in mind that I'm going to shake my lulav or I'm going to listen to the shofar, you're okay. You pretty much got there. So, apart from those 2 types of mitzvahs, the saying and the doing, I was a bit cheeky because there is a 3rd type of mitzvah, and that's thinking mitzvahs, which do require you to at least think, and it is better to talk about them. But these are mitzvahs that are mandated in the Torah, and there's 6 of them, 4 positive, 2 negative. I will give the sources in the comments section of the video on YouTube. Those 4 mitzvahs are to believe in God. We get that from the first of the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. Belief in God, to believe that God is controlling the universe. To fear God, not the sort of quivering, shaky fear of a big scary monster, but to an appreciation that God runs the world and we have obligations to him as a result of that. Okay, it's a more rational explanation, a more rational relationship with God, as in cause and effect. That God, that the universe is run by rules of nature that God chooses to operate through. The third level, the third mitzvah, is love of God. we perform that by saying the first paragraph of the Shema. In fact, one should have that in mind when one is saying the first paragraph of the Shema. That's the source for this mitzvah, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. That we have this relationship of God that's not contradictory to the second mitzvah that I said about fear of God. This relationship of love, yes, is an emotional relationship, is a gushing relationship. It's not based on rational, consequential cause and effect or causality. It's that God, we love God so much, we want to serve Him and do His mitzvahs with all of our resources, and so we owe so much to Him that we feel beholden to Him. And so, by doing His mitzvahs, we are performing the mitzvah of love of God, which is one of the reasons why the brachas, the blessings before the Shema, talk about love of God. The fourth and final of the positive mitzvahs that one can do, and as I say, that is the unity of God. Achdus Hashem, it's called in Hebrew, which we derive from the first line of the Shema, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. I have done a video on what we believe in God and what Judaism means by God, but here we're talking about the three components of His Achdus. That is, God is unique. He is uniquely Kodesh. He is uniquely spiritual, purely spiritual. He is indivisible. And God is sovereign over the universe and controls everything about our lives, and nothing happens without God's say so. So those are the four positive thought mitzvahs. Those are mitzvahs in the Torah. They have carry the same weight as a mitzvah, as shaking the lulav or listening to the shofar. They have a very high standard in Judaism. And they can be performed pretty much anywhere. On the tube, waiting for a bus, waiting in line for the shops. Just by contemplating these, or maybe saying the first line of the Shema, one can fulfill these mitzvahs. There's certain places one shouldn't: in the toilet, getting undressed, in the bathroom, with anything that's unpleasant, foul smelling, or where there's women people that are immodestly dressed. But generally speaking, one can fulfill these mitzvahs anywhere. The two negative mitzvahs, and this is where the thought crime comes back. These are prohibitions, is not to follow after your eyes. In other words, not to look where you shouldn't be looking, and not to do things you shouldn't, not to pursue things you shouldn't be pursuing. We derive that from Numbers chapter 15, verse 39. If it's okay, I'll leave that to your imagination to understand what that means. And then don't believe in anything but God. In other words, idolatry, believing that life is controlled by anything that is not controlled by God. Okay? And again, we believe that comes from the second of the Ten Commandments, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 3. So those are the only two of the six that are negative. They cannot be punished. You cannot be held accountable for them directly by a human court because they're thoughts. We can't prove or disprove that someone held those thoughts. But nonetheless, those are prohibitions. We also have Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, his Ikorim. These are often misunderstood. As well, what he does is he lays out 13 principles of faith that Jews believe in. Okay, they can be found in, I think they are in the Art Scroll Siddur. They've been converted into, they've been written down as a poem called Yigdal, which some people have the custom to say first thing in the morning. But they're what Jews believe in. What they are not is that if you do not believe in these, you are not. It doesn't count you as a heretic. And people often misunderstand that. It doesn't mean that if you don't believe in them, you're a heretic. No, these are what this Rambam was trying to codify what Jews believe. And so it's not a thought crime not to believe in these, or to not to understand them, or to not believe in them thoroughly, but obviously one should endeavour to do so as best one can. So that's the end of this video, talking about our relationship with God. The next video, we're going to talk about our relationship with our fellows.